Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our breakdown of the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. My name is Chandria Kelly. I am the main creator and owner of BCJ Decor. And we've decided to use this particular audiobook to examine the candle world. So taking a look at how to not only analyze those around us, analyze our business, but also analyze ourselves as business owners. If you are just joining us, this is episode number 2. In episode number 1, we actually took the first 24 minutes to look at the preface or prelude to everything. And within that time period, there were a couple of points that you will definitely hear me kind of pause and break down the experiences that I have had. And the goal is for us to create a community, a blog, and an outlook where we can kind of stop and talk about those things that we agree and disagree on. The beauty in it is keeping in mind we're all coming from different backgrounds and experiences. And that is truly what makes not only our products unique, but makes us unique as people. Now, a couple of recaps before we get into our first law, which is never outshine the master. And I'll tell you this, I heard the first law a couple of weeks ago on a return trip from one of my locations. And I'm sitting and listening to it, and I'm thinking when he first said the law of never outshine the master, I didn't know how to take that one at first. And this is one of those laws that I actually stopped and had to dissect from a personal standpoint and really try to figure out how this could be applicable to me. As always, some laws will be easier to apply than others. For some of us, we are growing toward that point, and for others, we're just starting out. So if you're working, grab your materials, just nestle back and take a listen. I think for a while, we're going to keep it where there is no video so you aren't distracted. But of course, feel free to join us on Facebook at BCJ Decor. Also, be sure to subscribe to this video so that you know when new content is being posted. We're definitely going to get through all 48 laws, and I would love to hear you guys and see the comments on whether you agree or disagree or how the laws apply to you. So we're going to begin at our 24-minute mark. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If you are catching up, of course, you can find the audiobook for the 48 Laws of Power online. There are several different postings of it found on YouTube, which is exactly where we're sharing directly from. Keep in mind, Mr. Robert Greene is also the author of the 33 Strategies of War, which is another good text. And I think for that one, we may have to use that one as a comparison when thinking about competition. But I don't want to delay this any longer because we're going to be a little bit over there time-wise anyway. So let's take a listen. I will pause as we go. Here's the biggest difference between the first video and this one. I have heard the first law. It's been quite some time, so I'll be pausing kind of in real time for you. I have my notebook and pen. I hope you have yours. Let's jot down and see what we can actually learn today.
Always make those above you feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please and impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents, or you might accomplish the opposite, inspire fear and insecurity. Make your masters appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain the heights of power. Transgression of the law. Nicolas Fouquet, Louis XIV's finance minister in the first years of his reign, was a generous man who loved lavish parties, pretty women, and poetry. He also loved money, for he led an extravagant lifestyle. Fouquet was clever and very much indispensable to the king. So, when the prime minister, Jules Mazarin, died in 1661, the finance minister expected to be named the successor. Instead, the king decided to abolish the position. This and other signs made Fouquet suspect that he was falling out of favor, and so he decided to ingratiate himself with the king by staging the most spectacular party the world had ever seen.
I'm going to pause this in. And there are actually two things that have come to mind. So we're on law number 1, never outshine the master. And I want you guys to take the word master and definitely think about mentors. That's a big one. And it's not as if I am shrinking myself and shrinking my potential to only build a person that I'm trying to learn from. And that probably was my first impression, honestly, of this law. I had to go back and listen to it again. But the further he goes in, and I want you guys to really listen to this historical breakdown. This one is a good one. It makes you think of those moments when you start learning, and as you're learning from someone else over a process that they've been doing for a while. A lot of my mentors, I tried to have several at different intervals. And I've talked about this one before as well. I like to hang with someone who is just starting out. I love to have a mentor that is 5 years in whatever industry I'm leaning toward. And I also like to find someone who is 15 or 20 years in. There's a difference in their approach. And there's also a difference in how what they're teaching me can be perceived. Never assume that your mentor will ever teach you 100% of what they know. And I've come to understand it's not always intentional. The thing is, I don't know all the things that I know. And I have mentored before. And I've also realized that those who mentored me have come to a point in our relationship when they will let you know that this may be perceived a little bit differently. But if I ever get to the point where I am not necessarily outshining because of the results of the reception from others, but I am actually becoming critical of what I'm being taught, it tells me that I have now elevated past where that particular mentor may be able to take me. That's a big one, y'all. Your mentors will change over time. Your journey changes over time. So as I'm listening to every single law, I'm thinking of the impact for myself as someone who has come into a business realm that seems from the outside very simple. Candles seem like a very simple product. But as you get further in and you realize there are different types and different styles, there are different ideologies, there are different approaches, it makes you really stop and try to analyze and define your product. This is when I'm trying to define my brand. Let's keep going.
The party's ostensible purpose would be to commemorate the completion of Fouquet's chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, but its real function was to pay tribute to the king, the guest of honor. The most brilliant nobility of Europe and some of the greatest minds of the time, La Fontaine, La Rochefoucauld, Madame de Sévigné, attended the party. Molière wrote a play for the occasion in which he himself was to perform at the evening's conclusion. The party began with a lavish 7-course dinner featuring foods from the Orient never before tasted in France, as well as new dishes created especially for the night. The meal was accompanied with music commissioned by Fouquet to honor the king. After dinner, there was a promenade through the chateau's gardens. The grounds and fountains of Vaux-le-Vicomte were to be the inspiration for Versailles. Fouquet personally accompanied the young king through the geometrically aligned arrangements of shrubbery and flower beds. Arriving at the garden's canals, they witnessed a fireworks display which was followed by the performance of Molière's play. The party ran well into the night, and everyone agreed it was the most amazing affair they had ever attended. The next day, Fouquet was arrested by the king's head musketeer, D'Artagnan. 3 months later, he went on trial for stealing from the country's treasury. Actually, most of the stealing he was accused of, he had done on the king's behalf and with the king's permission.
I'm pretty sure we know that something's not going to work out at this point. You're looking at someone whose goal was to find favor. because building those intimate relationships, whether they are with partners, whether they are with fellow channelers, or whether it's building that closeness with your particular mentor, is a goal of a lot of people. And what we do in that tendency is sometimes the pursuit of that friendship or the pursuit of that connection forces you to do things that you would not normally do. You guys see this a lot online. You will see a person come up with a product, and the line of questionings after they make that post aren't congratulatory. It's not like amazing product, beautiful candle, I love your wax melts, or your snap bars are amazing. It's not the fact that they poured so much into this. It's almost as if, let's stop this one. And where did you get the wax? Where did you find the color? Where did you find it's the where and the where. And they start to pick apart, which usually it makes that creator think, well, what's going to be the next product? What's going to be the next? And if you notice during this party, it was always a mention of the one up, the one up, the one up, the beautiful meal, the lovely grounds, the amazing fireworks, the lavishness of the event, the beautiful jars, those wonderful vessels, those different and unique wicks. It's looking but not seeing what needs to be seen, because how many of you forgot that the party was supposed to be about the king? The party was meant to bring a light and shine it on the king to let others know how much he was appreciated. But where do you think the spotlight is going to fall? For some of you, your goal is for your product to be the king. Your product should be what the light is shining on. And you haven't quite gotten to that point. You're trying to figure out why. Is the shine on you? Is the focus on something else? This is going to be one of those that takes you a little bit deeper. Just listen.
Fouquet was found guilty and sent to the most isolated prison in France, high in the Pyrenees Mountains, where he spent the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement. Interpretation. Louis XIV, the Sun King, was a proud and arrogant man who wanted to be the center of attention at all times. He could not countenance being outdone in lavishness by anyone, and certainly not his finance minister.
Oh my, we saw this one coming, right? You have to know the ins and outs of not only yourself, but those who you have chosen to follow. It's being careful on perception. Perception will always be there. And that first impression that you make is that perception of your brand that others are going to carry and walk away with. That first thing that comes to mind. How you are able to spread that thought and to share that message is a little bit different. The difference between the finance manager's intentions and how they were perceived is night and day. The difference between you creating and crafting that post to share your excitement about a new product that you had made, perhaps under the tutelage of someone else, is one thing, but how others come in and may critique what they see or want to duplicate what they see without providing credit is another one. How the success of that one product could make that mentor above you feel, even though it's not directly your intention, is another one. Wording and approach. And in business, thinking, rethinking, and waiting. Using your time wisely to pause on your thoughts and really think about the different views that can be taken from what's being said, the different ways that it can be pictured.
To succeed Fouquet, Louis chose Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a man famous for his parsimony and for giving the dullest parties in Paris. Colbert made sure that any money liberated from the treasury went straight into Louis's hands. With the money, Louis built a palace even more magnificent than Fouquet's, the glorious Palace of Versailles. He used the same architects, decorators, and garden designer. And at Versailles, Louis hosted parties even more extravagant than the one that cost Fouquet his freedom. Let us examine the situation. The evening of the party, as Fouquet presented spectacle on spectacle to Louis, each more magnificent than the one before, he imagined the affair as demonstrating his loyalty and devotion to the king. Not only did he think the party would put him back in the king's favor, he thought it would show his good taste, his connections, and his popularity, making him indispensable to the king and demonstrating that he would make an excellent prime minister. Instead, however, each new spectacle, each appreciative smile bestowed by the guests on Fouquet, made it seem to Louis that his own friends and subjects were more charmed by the finance minister than by the king himself, and that Fouquet was actually flaunting his wealth and power. Rather than flattering Louis XIV, Fouquet's elaborate party offended the king's vanity. Louis would not admit this to anyone, of course. Instead, he found a convenient excuse to rid himself of a man who had inadvertently made him feel insecure. Such.
How many people would not stop and speak up? How many people, when you notice the shortcoming is within you, would not stop to go back and correct it? How many of you have created a product that you assume was original to only find out that it had been created by someone else months, years in advance? How many of you would not go back to give credit where credit was due? How many of you are working under the tutelage of someone who will never be appreciative of what you have accomplished? Remember, this was all about never outshine the master. And the part about being a mentor that a lot of people forget, because the word master is so strong. I really like to use mentor. The thing about a mentor, and the one thing that I personally love, is number one, most people gravitate toward me, and I gravitate toward most of them because we have a common interest and a common goal. The other thing that I love, though, is it creates a certain energy within me when they become successful. That's the energy that pushes me to create new products and to push myself further. If your mentor is not receiving fuel and energy in a different form from you, you are in the wrong spot. If your mentor's goal, just like the king's, is only to be the center of attention, number one, and face forward, there's something wrong about that. There's a reason why a lot of the content that you guys will see me post is always going to focus itself around what can we walk away with? Because the message that you're getting from that post and the message that I'm sharing are coming from different places, but all of us can pull information from it. The goal is for everyone to grow, and that's a big one. Notice the words or the descriptions that they use to really allow you to picture the king. And we're talking about Louis XIV. We're talking about someone who was known as being arrogant, also known as being quite narcissistic, to be honest, who would go out, and if he visited somewhere else, another country that was more prosperous, more innovative, would come back and punish those under him for not being more, Sometimes it's not important to outshine the master. Sometimes it's more important to change the direction that you're going so that it will allow you to free yourself from that master.
Is the fate, in some form or other, of all those who unbalance the master's sense of self, poke holes in his vanity, or make him doubt his preeminence. Observance of the law. In the early 1600s, the Italian astronomer and mathematician Galileo found himself in a precarious position. He depended on the generosity of great rulers to support his research, and so, like all Renaissance scientists, he would sometimes make gifts of his inventions and discoveries to the leading patrons of the time. Once, for instance, he presented a military compass he had invented to the Duke of Gonzaga. Then he dedicated a book explaining the use of the compass to the Medicis. Both rulers were grateful, and through them, Galileo was able to find more students to teach. No matter how great the discovery, however, his patrons usually paid in with gifts, not cash. This made for a life of constant insecurity and dependence. There must be an easier way, he thought. Galileo hit on a new strategy in 1610 when he discovered the moons of Jupiter. Instead of dividing the discovery among his patrons, giving one the telescope he had used, dedicating a book to another, and so on, as he had done in the past, he decided to focus exclusively on the Medicis. He chose the Medicis for one reason. Shortly after Cosimo I had established the Medici dynasty in 1540, he had made Jupiter, the mightiest of the gods, the Medici symbol, a symbol of a power that went beyond politics and banking, one linked to ancient Rome and its divinities. Galileo turned his discovery of Jupiter's moons into a cosmic event honoring the Medici's greatness. Shortly after the discovery, he announced that the bright stars, the moons of Jupiter, offered themselves in the heavens to his telescope at the same time as Cosimo II's enthronement. He said that the number of the moons, 4, harmonized with the number of the Medicis. Cosimo II had 3 brothers, and that the moons orbited Jupiter as these 4 suns revolved around Cosimo I, the dynasty's founder. More than coincidence, this showed that the heavens themselves reflected the ascendancy of the Medici family. After he dedicated the discovery to the Medicis, Galileo commissioned an emblem representing Jupiter sitting on a cloud with the 4 stars circling about him, and presented this to Cosimo II as a symbol of his link to the stars.
Does anyone see the difference between the approach? We're looking at the difference between the finance manager who chose extravagance to try to demonstrate his feelings, compared to Galileo, who took a very different approach. It was complementary. Who took the approach of flattery, who took the approach of being quite congenial. And the difference is one version, some of us or many of us was impressed with. I thought the financial advisor was, woo, nice party, was my first impression. But then I remembered the whole goal was to make the king feel better, so that you yourself could advance. Galileo's problem was the same. He needed the acknowledgement. He needed the financial boost and had been receiving and giving gifts for quite some time. But he was willing to make a change in his approach. And that change allowed him to focus and to allow the shine to fall on others, which made it lucrative for him. Galileo is what represents a lot of our small businesses. And guess what? The master, guys, is that customer. It's that customer that you're chasing. It's that customer who, once they notice your brand, you don't have to chase anymore. They're captivated, but you want them to feel a part of the brand and a part of the process. It's when you welcome them into that family, whether it is through your website, through your content, it doesn't matter. It's bringing in that feeling that you are so awesome, it needs to be highlighted. This product is so awesome, it attracted you because you are awesome, because those are the only people that this brand will focus on. It's the approach. Let's see how it worked for Galileo.
In 1610, Cosimo II made Galileo his official court philosopher and mathematician with a full salary. For a scientist, this was the coup of a lifetime. The days of begging for patronage were over. Interpretation. In one stroke, Galileo gained more with his new strategy than he had in years of begging. The reason is simple. All masters want to appear more brilliant than other people. The producer of a great work wants to feel he is more than just the provider of the financing. He wants to appear creative and powerful, and also more important than the work produced in his name. Instead of insecurity, you must give him glory. Galileo did not challenge the intellectual authority of the Medicis with his discovery, or make them feel inferior in any way. By literally aligning them with the stars, he made them shine brilliantly among the courts of Italy. He did not outshine the master. He made the master outshine all others.
You guys caught it, huh? You caught it. When I can create that feeling of exclusivity, when I can not only embody what my brand is in my mind, but take that definition, apply it to my product, and the person that is purchasing that product feels the same. They feel as though there is an accomplishment, there is an improvement, that this embellishment did not make them better, but help them to discover that more inside of them. You've done something right. When I can create that product that encourages others to give it as a gift, a lot of us are lost on that. As candle makers, as creators of several different products that are normally used throughout the home or in very intimate and personal spaces, I don't want you to ever forget that you are creating a product that goes into one of the most intimate areas of people's lives. It will sit out and it will engage with everyone that walks through that space. It is a brand that a lot of people will hook on to, which many of us did. We have purchased candles, if not the majority of our lives, some of us as far back as we can remember. And a lot of us become very brand specific because there's something about their product that speaks to us. We do it with our kitchenware, we do it with our clothing, with our cars. We do it in so many different areas and we don't think about it. It's not that that vehicle made you any different than you were the day before. The goal of that company was to make you feel more important and more unique than the other cars that are driving on the highway. It gave you that experience. And that's what this is looking at. Galileo was extremely successful because he moved the spotlight and he put it on those that would allow him to move to where he needed to be. There are some customer requests that I cannot fulfill. You're going to get those. There are some people that you cannot make happy. Look at the king. He could have chosen to look at that situation differently. He could have analyzed the loyalty of that financial advisor who had stolen for him before. But guess what? That wasn't his focus. It was on how he felt, what allowed him to come to the foreground. And the opposite example, and in the interpretation, the application of it, allowing others to feel that level of success, to feel that level of involvement, is what allowed Galileo to eventually reach that goal.
Keys to power. When it comes to power, outshining the master is perhaps the worst mistake of all. Do not fool yourself into thinking that life has changed much since the days of Louis XIV and the Medicis. Those who attain high standing in life are like kings and queens. They want to feel secure in their positions and superior to those around them in intelligence, wit, and charm. It is a deadly but common misperception to believe that by displaying and vaunting your gifts and talents, You are winning the master's affection. He may feign appreciation, but at his first opportunity, he will replace you with someone less intelligent, less attractive, less threatening, just as Louis XIV replaced the sparkling Fouquet with the bland Colbert. And as with Louis, he will not admit the truth, but will find an excuse to rid himself of your presence. This law involves two rules that you must realize. First, you can inadvertently outshine a master simply by being yourself. There are masters who are more insecure than others, monstrously insecure. You may naturally outshine them by your charm and grace. No one had more natural talents than Astore Manfredi, Prince of Faenza, the most handsome of all the young princes of Italy. He captivated his subjects with his generosity and open spirit. In the year 1500, Cesare Borgia laid siege to Faenza. When the city surrendered, the citizens expected the worst from the cruel Borgia, who, however, decided to spare the town. He simply occupied its fortress, executed none of its citizens, and allowed Prince Manfredi, 18 at the time, to remain with his court in complete freedom. A few weeks later, though, soldiers hauled Astore Manfredi away to a Roman prison. A year after that, his body was fished out of the river Tiber, a stone tied around his neck. Borgia justified the horrible deed with some sort of trumped-up charge of treason and conspiracy. But the real problem was that he was notoriously vain and insecure. The young man was outshining him without even trying. Given Manfredi's natural talents, the prince's mere presence made Borgia seem less attractive and charismatic. The lesson is simple. If you cannot help being charming and superior, you must learn to avoid such monsters of vanity. Either that, or find a way to mute your good qualities when in the company of a Cesare Borgia. Second, never imagine that because the master loves you, you can do anything you want. Entire books could be written about favorites who fell out of favor by taking their status for granted, for daring to outshine. Knowing the dangers of outshining your master, you can turn this law to your advantage. First, you must flatter and puff up your master. Overt flattery can be effective, but has its limits. It is too direct and obvious and looks bad to other courtiers. Discreet flattery is much more powerful. If you are more intelligent than your master, for example, seem the opposite. Make him appear more intelligent than you. Act naive. Make it seem that you need his expertise. Commit harmless mistakes that will not hurt you in the long run, but will give you the chance to ask for his help. Masters adore such requests. A master who cannot bestow on you the gifts of his experience may direct rancor and ill will at you instead. If your ideas are more creative than your master's, ascribe them to him in as public a manner as possible. Make it clear that your advice is merely an echo of his advice. He must appear as the sun around which everyone revolves, radiating power and brilliance, the center of attention. If you are thrust into the position of entertaining him, a display of your limited means may win you his sympathy. Any attempt to impress him with your grace and generosity can prove fatal. Learn from Fouquet or pay the price. In all of these cases, it is not a weakness to disguise your strengths if in the end they lead to power. By letting others outshine you, you remain in control instead of being a victim of their insecurity. This will all come in handy the day you decide to rise above your inferior status, if, like Galileo, You can make your master shine even more in the eyes of others. Then you are a godsend and you will be instantly promoted.
Guys, as we come to an end on this particular episode, sometimes what's said at the end of the interpretations, and almost every law comes with two different interpretations. There's usually quite a bit packed in there. And as you listen to this one, and I'll encourage you over the next week or so to go back and listen to it a few more times, you're really paying attention to not only sheltering yourself, but you learn to do this with our ideas. It can sound callous the first time you go through. It's pretending to make mistakes, which honestly, most of us don't have to pretend to do. There are quite a few of us where when you are working through new thoughts, new ideas, just new occasions overall, you figure out pretty quickly that mistakes are where you do the most growing. It's also nice to have that person that I can turn to, that I'm able to really reach out to and say, hey, can you assist me or help me with this in particular? Because that happens. This really, really, really makes me kind of pause and think about when we are making either new products, or we're coming out with new fragrances, or we're putting a twist on something that we've seen as inspiration. And we're trying to figure out a way to pull information from our mentor or from the person that we've been following or hanging with for a certain amount of time, without making it appear as though that information flow is always one direction. When you're working specifically with the mentor, I want you guys to think about this. Once again, your mentor is getting as much from you as you should be getting from them. Your mentor will never give you 100% because they're always, hopefully, changing and evolving as they go. So that 100% mark is something that probably 30 to 40% of what they're thinking, they're milling over in their minds over and over again, because it's a process before it becomes a product. The other thing is you kind of think about your customers overall. Your customers are a wonderful source of information. And when you've grown your business to a point, especially in a world of social media, it becomes really big and extremely important for you to remember that that source is one that needs to be tapped. Yes, I am asking for fragrance suggestions. Yes, I am posting and trying to get a feel for how a new vessel is perceived, or how a new subscription line is perceived, or how a new product, because everything that I create in my shop is not a candle. I'm also looking for feedback and remembering to not take it personal, not allowing that part to crush what I'm doing, but to allow it to help me to grow. And I know that there's a learning curve with each new thing that I do, and I prepare myself, not only mentally and physically, but financially, to be able to make those mistakes. And that's where personally, I know BCJ Decor is now. As a business owner, as I'm going through each of these laws, and I'm actually jotting down some of the highlights and listening to the interpretations and the points, I'm realizing that there are some areas as far as social media presence, as far as attracting and retaining new customers, and keeping those current customers happy and motivated with your products, which are going to be those evolving wheels, those revolving wheels that never stop, because that is the order of business. I encourage you guys to always dive deep to research and to look for new ways to grow yourself. I encourage you guys to look for ways to calm your mind and to take those moments, or to do those crafts that clear you away from what you're known for, so that you can remain the person that you want to be. I encourage you guys at all times to be reflective on everything, on each event, and to know that there are other makers out here that are supporting you, that are looking up to you. Whether you know it or not, you are someone's mentor. And whether you know it or not, you are somewhere in the world that master that a lot of people are trying not to outshine. I'll talk to you guys soon as we do our next video. We're leaving off at 40 minutes and 23 seconds. We're going to make it over to law number 2 in our next video, and I hope that you will join me then. I will see you soon. Have a good one, guys.